NFL Today presents Super Bowl VIII.
January 13th, 1974. The Miami Dolphins are the defending champions of the National Football League, having won Super Bowl VII the year before by going a perfect 17-0. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Vikings are back in the Super Bowl under head coach Bud Grant for the second time in the last 5 seasons. Two teams entering the game with identical records of 14-2, including the playoffs. Two future Hall of Fame quarterbacks lining up against each other in Bob Greasy and Fran Tarkenton. It should have been a pretty good game, right? Instead, it was anything but that. Minnesota came out flat. After the first quarter, they trailed 14-0. To this day, this stands as the largest deficit after one quarter in Super Bowl history. Minnesota wouldn't score until early in the fourth quarter and would wind up losing the game 24-7. The Vikings turned it over twice. They committed 7 penalties, an astonishingly high number considering the fact that referees at the time swallowed their whistles in the big game. For some perspective, at Super Bowl VII the year before, there were just 6 penalties called the entire game, and at Super Bowl VI, there were only 3 penalties called. And the Vikings, who allowed just 5 rushing touchdowns during the entire regular season, which was the best total in the league, allowed the Dolphins to find the end zone 3 times on the ground. They came out flat. It was almost like they hadn't practiced all week. And that's because, to an extent, that was true. This is the story of how the Vikings were the victims of insanely poor planning by the league, and how this may have caused the Vikings to lose the Super Bowl. Now, before I start, I'm not saying that the events that happened as described in this video are the only reason that the Vikings lost Super Bowl VIII. Nor am I saying that if these events never happened, Miami would have never won the Super Bowl that year. This is not to take anything away from the Dolphins and their performance on that day. However, what happened in the week leading up to Super Bowl VIII didn't exactly help Minnesota at all. It's like when the referee blows a call in a 14-point game. The call isn't the main reason that you lost, and if the call was made properly, there's still a pretty good chance that you would have lost the game anyways. But the call being blown didn't exactly help your situation. Super Bowl VIII was the first ever Super Bowl held in Houston, as the game was held at Rice Stadium. Nowadays, holding the Super Bowl in Houston isn't something out of the ordinary, as in the last 15 years, we've seen Super Bowls 38 and 51 held in the city. But in 1974, Houston was new to hosting, which means there were quite a few kinks to work out. Mainly, where would both teams be practicing? Cities that had hosted the game before had figured this out already. As an example, Super Bowl VI was the second Super Bowl held in New Orleans, so the practices went off without a hitch. Houston, however, hadn't gotten this all straightened out. So while the Dolphins got to practice at the Oilers' state-of-the-art facility, there wasn't a second facility available for the Vikings that was of any quality. Instead, the Vikings got to practice at Del Mar High School. Now, there are some facilities in Texas for high school football that are obscenely nice, and are arguably nicer than some Division I college facilities. But in 1974, Del Mar was not one of them. Far from it, in fact. While the Dolphins were practicing at an NFL facility with its state-of-the-art equipment and amenities, the Vikings high school facility did not have any of that. They had no tackling dummies. It had no blocking sheds. The locker room was clearly not built for NFL players. The locker room wasn't even carpeted. The shower heads didn't work. Actually, calling it a locker room is being kind, because there were no lockers. That's right. The practice facility where the Vikings prepared for Super Bowl VIII had no clothes hooks and no lockers. And if that wasn't bad enough, the motel where the Vikings were staying at was nowhere near where they were practicing. The distance between the motel and the practice facility was over 10 miles. This meant that the Vikings would hold their team meetings at the motel and then take a 20-minute bus ride to go to practice. Meanwhile, the Dolphins had their motel and practice facility within walking distance of each other. So you might be asking yourself, why didn't the Vikings do anything about this? Well, they tried to, and the NFL shut it down. The Vikings requested that they would be able to practice at Rice Stadium, but the league said they couldn't do that, because crews would be working to get ready for the game. Now on its own, that statement makes sense. It would have been odd for the Patriots or the Rams to have practiced at Mercedes-Benz Stadium last year for Super Bowl 53. But remember that at Super Bowl VI, one of the Dolphins' practice facilities was Tulane Stadium, which was where the game was being played. And at Super Bowl IV, which was the first Super Bowl that the Vikings ever made, they got to practice at Tulane Stadium. Different city, obviously, but the idea of practicing in the actual stadium where the game would be played wasn't out of the realm of possibility. So then the Vikings suggested an alternative. They wanted to practice at Houston University. Now, one could reasonably assume that Houston had pretty good practice facilities, seeing as they were a Division I school and had finished inside the top 20 of the final AP poll in 5 of the previous 6 seasons. I'm assuming it would have been really tough to get good players if your facilities were garbage. But the league shot this proposal down as well, because school was in session. Think about that for 1 second. The Vikings couldn't practice there because school was in session. Teams practiced at schools pretty regularly for Super Bowls. The year before, at Super Bowl VII, the Dolphins practiced at a local community college in the Los Angeles area. The league had used Tulane Stadium as a practice facility for each of the 2 Super Bowls held in New Orleans, when Tulane was in session. And the Vikings were already practicing at a school that I'm presuming was in session. Not sure what made this any different. So despite Minnesota's best efforts, they couldn't get anything going. And safe to say, head coach Bud Grant was not happy about this at all. He called the treatment shabby, and said that the quality of the facilities was like a junior high school. He called the league out very directly, stating that at times, the league is too busy patting itself on the back for its public relations and forgets about the teams. And he flat out said that Miami had a huge advantage and that the league had no excuses for this when they had a whole year to get ready for the game. So did the horrible preparation on the part of the NFL play a part in the Vikings' loss that day against the Dolphins in Super Bowl VIII? It's very easy to see how practicing under horrible conditions can lead to this. Now, it definitely wasn't the only reason why the Dolphins ended up winning that day, and there's absolutely nothing that says that if the roles were reversed, that the Vikings would have been world champions. But as I mentioned earlier, it definitely didn't help. Whether it was poor preparation, or poor play on the field, or a mix of both, the Vikings' quest for their first ever Super Bowl fell short. And unfortunately for the Vikings, to this day, they're still looking for that first Vince Lombardi trophy.